or better known as the DCOE in the book world, the Deputy Commander of Everything. Although I'm thinking of changing my title to the Commander of Everything. So I think that might be more appropriate. What do you think, Brad?
No.
So we have a couple of guests here I wanted to introduce. We've got Ted Bell, who's hiding somewhere. I'm not sure where he went. He is the author of the Alex Hawk series, right? I got that right? And then also Don Bentley writes the... Where is Don Bentley?
I think they're both at the bar.
They're both at the bar! Don Bentley writes the Matt Drake series, and he also is writing Tom Clancy's new books, the Jack Ryan Jr. series. So we're really excited to have them here tonight. So if you get a chance to meet them, say hello. And I would also like to thank Sean Cameron, who's 1/3 of the Crew Reviews podcast. And he's agreed to come here tonight and interview Brad on a live stream. So if you guys could kind of be quiet in the background so that everyone watching on YouTube Live can hear what they're saying. And then of course I have to introduce my husband, Brad Taylor.
Hey, Brad!
Who brought us all here tonight, who's the author of the Pike Logan series of books. This is book number 16, End of Days. And we just found out that it's on the New York Times bestseller list. Good job, Brad. What are you going to say?
I'm going to call out somebody. It was a really hard book to write. This one, because of COVID, I had to sit there and I was stuck in a couch, and my wife would sit there and say, "Get out of here." But I dedicated the book to a personal friend of mine who is actually one of the best persons I've ever served with in the military, and she's here. She actually showed up. Where is she? Oh, she's hiding.
Raise your hand, Tammy.
Tammy Burrell is my favorite person in the universe. And I served with her for a long time in the military, and the book's dedicated to her. And people talk about, I wouldn't have a a writing career if it wasn't for her. Because I wrote Jennifer Cahill, who's a female, and I said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And she would read it and go, "That's ridiculous. No woman would do that. Fix this." And so I'd fix it, and then she'd say, "Well, she's not a coward. Give her a spine, fix it." And I'd go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And she's read every single book I've written. And I would not have a writing career without her. And I'm actually impressed that she actually showed up tonight. So, she lives in Florida. She came up tonight. Love you, Kenny.
I would just like to add a special thank you to all the people who came out tonight again, and also there are a couple people who've flown in from out of town. Brad's agent is here, John Talbot. We're thankful for that. Thank you. And there were a couple ladies I met earlier who came from Indiana and Ohio because they love Pike Logan. So I'm so glad that there are people who like Pike Logan and Brad Taylor as much as I do. So without further ado, Sean, Cameron, and Brad Taylor. So thank you.
By the way, there's Ted Bell. He's back. Wait. So, Brad, Sweet 16 here with Pike Logan. And I think all 16 have been on the Times bestselling list, so congratulations.
Yeah, it's a miracle.
It's phenomenal. So why don't you give the people here who haven't had a chance to read it a spoiler-free summary of what the story's about to start off.
Actually, what happened was way back when, 5 books ago, so Elaine and I talk in book time.
Right.
So 5 books ago, this is what happened. We came out of Morocco. We were doing research for Ring of Fire. Ring of Fire? Mm-hmm. Is that right? And we were in Rome. And Elaine, because she sets all this up, she said, "I'm going to do a 2-day layover in Rome because we're going to do some stuff in Rome." And we did. I took a Segway tour, being the Great American Tourist. And this car came by, and it had a diplomatic license plate on it. And the tour guide said, "That guy's a Knight of Malta." And I was like, "Knight of Malta? Never heard of it. What is that?"
he gave me a class on it. So they've been around since the First Crusade. They have their own passports. They have diplomatic relationships with multiple countries. They make their own currency. They have their own postage, all that stuff. And I was like, that is the weirdest organization I've ever heard of. Sooner or later, I'm going to put them in a book. And then I got locked in for COVID, and I was like, time to put them in a book.
And the story, how much or how little do you want to share with them about how they impact the story?
Well, actually, the one thing that you had in COVID was Amazon.
Right.
You could get the books. And so I read probably 6 books on the Knights of Malta. And the one thing that actually did occur was they're actually good dudes. They do a lot of good stuff in the world. They're a charitable organization. And I actually was like, do I want to go full Da Vinci Code on this? And, make them all bad guys? And I couldn't do that because they actually do a lot of good stuff in the world. So I decided I'd do, I'll split the difference on this thing. It'll be an Iran-Contra thing. So while Ollie North is running around doing bad things, it doesn't mean the entire government's bad.
Right.
It's just Ollie North is bad. And that's what I did. I said, okay, I didn't want to make them the bad guys because they actually do a lot of good work in the world. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories about them. I mean, they're all over the place. And I was like, nah, I'm going to make Iran-Contra type thing. There's going to be some bad people in this organization who can leverage their passports and everything else, and that's what they're going to do.
So let's talk about that bad sect of the group. They're not your typical thriller-verse villain.
No.
I mean, they're very novel, no pun intended. Was it kind of freeing to be able to have this group that nobody knew about and that there aren't a lot of stereotypes about? To this, they're extremists, but at different kinds. Kind of freeing the author to play with that.
Yeah, actually, it was kind of a flip of. I write about Islamic terrorism all the time, and now it's a complete flip. These guys are not Islamic terrorists; they're Christian terrorists. They're going to go run around killing people. And as I was writing it, I did a ton of research to see how this is going to work out. Where am I going to go with this? How am I going to do this? And as I wrote it, it was, you honestly sit there and say to yourself, am I about to cause everybody in the universe not to read my books? Because, it's like, okay, I see where this guy's going. Well, I've sat across from terrorists. I've literally interrogated terrorists, and the guy across from the table from me is, he's laughing, he's making jokes, he's a happy guy, and I like him, and I'm like, why does that guy want to blow everybody up? Well, he wants to blow everybody up because I'm the bad guy. He's the good guy. He's the one that's doing the right thing. He's the good guy. I'm the one that's doing the wrong thing. And when I started writing this book, I was like, that works both ways. This guy thinks he's doing the right thing, but he's not. He's doing the wrong thing.
So let's talk about, I'm going to be very careful not to be spoilerish here, but one of your characters has certain predilections that makes your book not only this worldwide conspiracy sort of identity book, but it's also a police procedural a bit. Where the hell did that come from? What led you down that thread?
So, what he's talking about, I'm going to give you a spoiler. The guy that's running around doing everything, he's the serial killer. He's killing people. He's
unrelated to the rest of the plot.
Unrelated. He's killing people because he is a serial killer. And I love murder mysteries. That's what I read. And so when I first did it, actually, one of the things that, here's a spoiler alert, my very first chapter I wrote was him killing somebody. And my editor said, that's too gall darn bloody, you can't have that first chapter. I'm telling you,
too bloody.
It was splayed out, all kinds of stuff going on. I'm like, that's the first chapter. And he said, no, you can't put that in there. That's just too gory. You cannot put that in there. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm trying to show that this guy's a bad guy. That's what he is. He is Silence of the Lambs type thing. That's what he does. Nope, can't put it in there. So the first chapter became the paragliding thing, the assassination. The paragliding, I'm like, okay, so a guy can fall from the sky and get killed, but I can't slit somebody's throat? What are you talking about?
You're not Thomas Harris, I guess. But yeah, and actually the paragliding thing came from research from a previous book as well, right? Daughter of War?
It did not. It did, so to speak. So we were all over in Switzerland, and I didn't do paragliding, and my wife did. She went, where's Elaine? Raise your hand. So she did a paragliding thing. And when I was writing this scene where I was like, okay, I'm going to kill this guy this way. Because the problem set you have is, and I guess I'm going to sound evil, but if I'm going to kill somebody, I got to separate them from their protective detail.
Right.
And the Mossad has a protective detail about the Ramset, and I have to get rid of them. Well, where do I get rid of them? You're up paragliding, there's nobody there, you're going to get rid of them. And so I wrote that scene, but I had never paraglided. My wife had, and I said, where are all the videos from you paragliding? Because I don't care about you going, oh, look at me, this is great. What I want to see is, where's the three-ring loop assembly? Where's the reserve? Where's all this stuff? Where'd you take off from? Where did you land? Because I'm going to kill this guy. And that's what I did.
Now, I know you've talked about, you've actually used this phrase, I believe, that like, the problem with writing current events is that they're current.
Yeah.
And you have to be very on top of what's happening in the world, and actually ahead of the curve, really, because by the time your book comes out, things have happened. In this book, COVID plays a big part, but you actually turn it to your advantage, in my opinion, and you use it as a plot point and kind of a way to get Pike and Jennifer in motion.
Yeah.
Tell me about that process, about going from like, what the hell am I going to do, to, oh, I can use this.
That was the hardest thing ever. I had, so I wrote American Trader, my last book. I came out of Taipei, Australia, did all the research, came home, and then we got locked in. I mean, COVID hit. And I had to make a decision. I'm like, do I put this in the book? I have a picture of Elaine in Shinland Night Market. She's doing this with 3,000 people behind her. Now there's nobody. I've got a scene I've written where Pike's doing a surveillance effort at Sydney Harbor, but now nobody's on the Sydney Harbor. It's him and one guy. Right. I mean, that's all that's there. They're gone. And so I punted that and put it in January 2020, which is where the Taiwanese elections happened, which is basically the book. So I didn't mind that. Well, then I wrote this book, and it was like, now what do I do? Do I include COVID? I mean, a good friend of mine, Mark Greeny, is a phenomenal writer. He was like, I'm never writing about COVID. And I'm like, well, you kind of have to write about COVID because it's there. Mm-hmm. It exists. And I thought, I talked to him and I was like, well, maybe I won't do it either. Well, I started looking at the variants of where things were going and were working, and Africa had all these variants coming out, and I'm like, this thing is not going away. You've got to put it in the book. But how do you put it in the book? I mean, it's not a book about COVID, but it is something else that the task force that Pike Logan works for, it's something he has to deal with. You have to deal with the weather, you have to deal with flight plans, you have to deal with the enemy, you have to deal with the terrorist threat. Now you got to deal with COVID. How are you going to deal with that? And so I started looking at it and saying, how would I actually do this? We couldn't get in the EU, European Union, basically Europe, because of COVID. But the Israelis could. They had a huge vaccination program that's going on. They could all get in there. And I actually had a couple of Israeli assassins that were sitting on the shelf. I'm like, okay, I'll use them. So some of the stuff for COVID is not, it actually works out well for thriller writers. I mean, if you go to London or any other country, I mean, how do we capture the Boston bombing? Video surveillance. Somebody came out and said, here's the guys that blew up everybody in the Boston bombing. Here's their picture. Who are they? And they said, okay, I know that guy. I know who it is. Here it is. Well, now you're talking about in the COVID era, if I'm wearing a face mask, sunglasses, and a hat, that ain't happening. I can do whatever I want to on the ground and get out of it right away.
For those of you who haven't read, it's also a very creative way to put Pike in play, kind of outside the normal task force realm, and it worked out very well. So you mentioned Israeli assassins, so that's what I want to talk about. Fans of Shoshana, who've read his books, are going to be really, really happy about this book. She's a very important character. But what I want to know is, when you created Shoshana, did you at all have any inkling of what she would become in your series and the importance to your fans?
No, she was dead. I was killing her. I wrote Ring of Fire, she was dead. I was going to get rid of her right off the bat. And I liked her too much, so I let her live. And it wasn't until I wrote The Insider Threat, I was writing a scene inside Jordan, and I was creating these things out of whole cloth. You know, I got to have this thing and that going on, this going on, that. Everything's going to be, because I'm creating a whole cloth. And I was like, you actually have some people on the bookshelf that you've never talked about since that book. I pulled them in, Aaron and Shoshana. And then I got a shit ton of I'm sorry, Elaine. I got a ton of emails saying, oh, they're back. I can't believe it, they're back. I'm like, thank God I didn't kill them.
Yeah. So is she as fun to write as she is to read, or is she a challenge for you to write?
She is a challenge. She really is a challenge. Where's Tammy? She's a serious challenge to write, to make sure that I'm doing, one of the hardest things about writing female characters is that I'm male. I can't do that. And Tammy's helped me innumerably over and over again to make this work. And actually, did I not mention this book's dedicated?
Yes, you did.
So it's really hard to write those kind of scenes. And I go over and over again, and sometimes I can write 5 chapters and just get done with it. Or it'll take me a paragraph to get this one thing right. And that takes just as long as writing 5 chapters.
Yeah.
Just as long. To make sure that Shoshana, there's a scene in Ghosts of War, which is one of my best books, where Shoshana is there with Jennifer. And I wrote that scene over and over and over again until I got it. And when I read it, I was like, that's it.
Well, Shoshana, in addition to being like just a dynamite character, there's a lot of humor that comes out in her relationship with Pike and the dynamic with her and Jennifer. And that's what I want to talk about humor. Anybody that reads Brad Taylor knows that as serious as it is and as epic as the action is, there's always just the right amount of humor. It's kind of a pressure relief valve in a lot of cases. And what I want to ask you is, you can't talk a lot about your experience in detail, but is that part of your experience? Is there that gallows humor? Was that present in your life before writer and the life that led to this?
Absolutely. I mean, you could take, where's Chris Kreider? You can't do an operation in the military without humor. I mean, I'm telling you, there's so many stories I could tell you where it's like, you're the best of the best? No. Here's what happened. It's absolutely, when I'm writing a scene, and for instance, there was a scene I was writing with Aaron and Shoshana, actually. And he gives a death stare and talks on the phone, and it's all scary, and this guy's going to go away. And Pike says, I thought you were going to ask for your $2, which is from Better Off Dead. And he's like, the Israeli's like, what do you mean, ask for my $2? That just popped in my head. I'm like, I'm putting that on a page. That's funny.
It's funny because when I talk to, we talk to authors who are military, ex-police, physicians, and in the most stressful moments of their life, that's when they find themselves being the funniest. And
Absolutely.
Every time I read your books, that's what I think about that as well. So another sort of reality versus fiction thing. Fiction is always an exaggerated or bent version of reality. The dynamic between the operator in the field and the bureaucracy, the people who are making decisions at a snail's pace when the person in the field, how real is what we're reading when compared to your experience in the field from that standpoint?
It's not real at all. I mean, at the end of the day, if I was going to write a book about what the real world was like, it would be 300 pages of PowerPoint presentations, and the last chapter would be, you're not allowed to go there. If you're going to do an operation in war zone, Afghanistan, Iraq, there's always a lead federal agency. And a lead federal agency in the war zone is Department of Defense. Anywhere else, it's State Department. And you don't get to do anything you want to do. There's a lot of, people talk about stuff about how we can just get in there and do this and do that. No, you're not. When you step into the ambassador for any given country is a 4-star equivalent, and he is the president's personal representative in that country. So as a military guy, if I'm going to step in there and say, I'm going to go kick this guy's ass, I'm going to take this down, or do whatever I'm going to do, he's like, no, you're not. And I'm the guy that says, you can't do that. It's really hard to do. In fact, we used to actually fantasize about, I created the task force. I didn't want to write about a book about any unit I'd ever served in because it's classified. I didn't want anybody to think I was just changing the names to protect the innocent or whatever. So I created a task force. So we used to kind of fantasize about it. Wouldn't it be neat to have this thing? You could go run it amok and do this stuff. But in the real world, it doesn't work that way. I mean, it's hard.
Okay, my last question, and audience, if you have some questions in your head, you can think about them and we'll pull you up here too. But my last question is, 16 books in, Pike Logan from One Rough Man is a different man than in the depths. He's grown, he's changed, he's grown positive and probably fallen back in some areas, I'm sure. What, to your mind, is the most dramatic way he's grown, and in what way are you still trying to bring his stubborn ass along?
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's literally the hardest thing about writing a series, because people grow. If you go to college, you grow. You get married, you grow. You have kids, you grow. Pike's going to grow. He's got to grow. I can't have the same guy doing the same thing each time. And that's really the hardest thing there is. And for end of days, luckily I still have Shoshana. I can pull her ass out and show him growing. Because Pike's trying to stop her.
Right.
Pike has now become somebody who understands that what I did before was awful. And you're doing awful now. I'm going to stop you from doing awful. Because I know what awful did to me, and I'm not going to let that happen to you. And that's it's just hard to do.
Yeah. Is there an area that you think, oh man, I gotta develop this part of him over the next 16 books? Let's say 16 books.
Actually, Elaine will know this. I write one book at a time.
Right.
I give everything into the single book I'm writing right now. This is it. This is the best book ever. I'm going to be done with it. And then when I get done with it, I'm like, why the hell did you write that? Because now the next book is going to have a reflection of this book. A good example is Daughter War. Amina is a Syrian refugee who I was going to kill in chapter 4. I mean, she's on stage left, she's done. And I liked her too much. She took over the entire book. In fact, Daughter of War, the title of that book was Shadow Strike, all the way through, until I finished writing it and I said, hey, this girl's taken over the entire book. It's now going to be called Daughter of War. Here she is. Woo! Best book ever. Woo! Love that book. The next book, I'm like, she exists. She's in the universe now. And I actually told my editor, I was like, I'm going to open up the next book with a funeral because she got hit by a car, because I don't want to have to deal with her. I mean, I put her in there, now she exists, and now I'm like, okay, what do I do with her? And I didn't, obviously, but that's the hardest part, is stringing it along and making sure that everything connects. Because you got, new readers will read a book and say, that's a great book. Old readers will say, what the hell happened to Amina?
Yeah.
Well, she got hit by a car.
Awesome. So does anybody have any questions? We have a microphone that we can bring to you. There's a gentleman back there. First hand up.
Chris Miller.
Hey, Brad.
Oh, that's Chris. Hey, Chris.
I'm not going to promote my book review site.
Just curious if you were worried about taking a religious overtone into your book at all, or if that was really something you really wanted to take to it, or you were a little bit
Actually-
hesitant at all.
It wasn't until I finished the entire book that I realized I'd done a religious overtone. When it was, the whole thing was done, I was like, I'm going to do this at ABCND, and I love this organization. They're really weird, and I'm going to figure this out. And then Elaine said, you kind of poked him in the eye. You got some kind of religious stuff going on. And I was like, I did? I didn't think about it at all until the book was done. And then I was like, I actually got an email the other day. I'm so disappointed in this book. It's like, what did I do wrong? Well, it turns out he's an Ina Malta. He didn't like it. So no, I didn't think about it as I was writing it, because when I write a book, I don't really think about religion per se. I think about vectors of threats. Here's what goes on in the world. And some people are Islamic, some people are Catholic, some people are Christian, whatever. That's the vector. That's what I'm looking at. And it wasn't until I was done that I realized that, well, you're writing for a Christian audience. You might have screwed that up. So I don't know.
It was a great book, and Sean, you and the crew, love you guys too.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Anybody else have a question? We have a strolling microphone that can find you. It doesn't have to be about the book. It can be about Pike Logan at large.
Somebody better ask a question or I'm not.
Billy, you got any questions?
Don't give her the mic.
You just said ask the question. So I don't know if this is easy or hard. Make it as easy as you want. But how do you organize your plots and your novel planning, and how do you keep track of everything and
I
work
don't.
through it all? No?
I don't. I wish I could do that. I never thought I'd have a single book published, much less 16. And a funny story, I was writing No Fortunate Son, which was book 7. So I'm writing the book, and Kurt Hale, who's the commander of the task force, is a bachelor, and he's got his sister's got a kid who he thinks is his daughter. He treats her as his daughter. And she gets kidnapped. That's the entire book. The entire thing is trying to find Kurt Hale's niece. And it's a really good book if you want to read it, because it's probably the best one I've ever written. But I get the email after it's all said and done, hey, what happened to Kurt Hale's wife? I'm like, he's not married. What are you talking about? Well, in the very first book, I had this one throw-off sentence, which was, I've got a date night with my wife I can't miss. That's it. And I'm like, oh my God, Kurt Hale's married.
Or was.
So Actually, Elaine did tell me. She's like, I think Kurt Hill's married. And I'm like, no, he's not. I'm the one writing these books. He's not married. And sure as shit he was. So I wish I could do better than that, but I haven't yet.
It's working.
Mr. John Bentley.
Brad Taylor, Don Bentley here.
Oh, Don.
Question
Wait a minute.
for,
First of all, do you have oh, you do. Okay.
is this, yeah. So, question for, one of the things that you do really, really well is to put violence on the page. And you put violence on the page in a way that still makes you, it draws you in without spending minutes figuring out whose hand is where and which brand of kung fu they're using. And so, can you walk us through how you do that?
Yeah, I actually, when I write a fight scene, whether it's a gunfight or an actual physical altercation, what you have to do, in my mind, I'm a reader first. That's what I do. I'm a reader. So I write what I would like to read. How would I like to read this? And there's a lot of times where you can really get bogged down in the minutia of this guy drew a Glock 23 with an Armor Hull sight out of his Kydex holster while he had on his Oakleys and bang, 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 he's going to do something. When you could just say, he shot a pistol. I mean, the reader gets that. Pistol, bullet, going somewhere. Do you need to see all that other stuff? There's other times when you need to do that. I was writing a scene in All Necessary Force where the whole thing is running around with the Chinese guys, and they have China has this integrated suppressed pistol. It's only made in China, and Pike's going to find it. So I have to describe that because when Pike finds it, that's an indicator that these guys are Chinese. There's a plot point that's going forward. But ordinarily, I don't do a lot of descriptions about stuff. What I like to say is, if you're, there's two ways to look at how a scene's going. You can be on the street watching a car crash, or you can be in the car, feeling the car crash. What I want is the guy in the car feeling the car crash, not on the street watching the car crash. And so when I design those, and those are, I'm surprised you guys say question, you son of a bitch. Those are some of the hardest scenes to write. I can write 5 chapters of just blah, 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 and 1 paragraph of here's the fight. And that 1 paragraph I'll rewrite 1,000 times because I want the person reading this book to be in the car, not on the street watching the car crash. And it's hard to do.
So Brad's going to sign books right here. So if you have a book you want signed, you can line up right here going this way. And he will sign your book. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I hope you'll stay and have drinks and food and enjoy the rest of the party. We really appreciate you coming out. Thank you.